Today we're going to be taking cuttings to propagate soft fruit bushes on pots and trowels, which is brought to you with the support of Cobra Garden and Darlac. Hello and welcome to Pots and Trowels. I'm just taking off the covers from the fruit cage here. I grow my gooseberries and redcurrants and blackcurrants all in the fruit cage here to keep the birds off them through the summer, because otherwise they take all the fruit. But at this time of the year I want to take them off. It lets the birds in because they'll take any insects and any grubs that are in there in the soil. It also means that we can get in there to clear the leaves up and do the weeding and just tidy through to get it ready for a little bit of winter pruning. But before that I want to take some cuttings, and now is the perfect time to take cuttings of gooseberries, redcurrants, whitecurrants and blackcurrants, and they all root really well from what we call hardwood cuttings. And that's when you've got this new season's growth on there, this 1 year old wood. That this is where we pruned it last year, so this is one season's growth on there, and that's what we need to take the cuttings. So what I'm going to do is just select a few of those and just prune them off. I'm going to prune them above a bud. It's always good practice. This is what I would be doing when I'm doing the pruning anyway, just taking off these long shoots to create little spurs. This is a red currant, an old variety called Laxton, and it's a really good one. So I've got some of those off the red currant, exactly the same on a black currant. And then on the gooseberry here, gooseberries are a bit sort of different in growth habit, but we've got these long growths again, which will be pruned back later. I'm just going to take that one off there just to show you. So we want these to be a little bit longer, so I'm just getting in there and just going to prune it above a bud. I almost went below it then, with a nice sharp pair of secateurs like that. So what I'll do is take these back to the table and I'll show you how to prepare them to get them to grow as cuttings. Well, preparing the cuttings is really simple, and as I said, these are hardwood cuttings, so we normally take them sort of from mid-November through until really I suppose February, but I always think they root much better if you can get them taken and inserted before Christmas. It just gives them longer to root, so now is the perfect time to do it. So I'm just going to put the gooseberry down there and we'll just have a look at this red currant first. Now this is exactly the same on, as I said, white currants and also black currants, so we want a nice piece of the new growth there, and I'm going to make a cut immediately below a bud there. So I've got my secateurs nice and sharp, and we're going to show you how to sharpen them next week. So just cut through there, and then I'm just going to use my secateurs here just as a rough gauge, and just cut it above that bud there. And I'm doing a sloping cut at the top, so a straight cut at the bottom, sloping cut there, and it really is as simple as that. There, waste. I'm just going to do another one just to show you. So it really is easy. Cut that one below, measure it with the secateurs, that bud's roughly the height, sloping bud above it. So there we have two. Let's make three. Below that bud there, take that little barky bit off, just measure it there, and I'm going to go to that bud there and cut it. Now the reason we do a sloping cut at the top is for two reasons. If we have it flat, then the water can sit on the top of that and it could damage the bud. So this way the water will always run away from the bud. But the other reason is if you then drop these on the floor and pick them up and you're not sure which way they go, it's always easy. The pointy bit, the slopey cut, is always the top of the cutting. So it just makes it easy to identify. So that is how we prepare those, and the idea is when we push those in the ground, they're going to go in the ground 2/3 below, 1/3 above. So some of these buds will probably grow from below plus these here, so you'll get a multi-stemmed bush, what we call a stalled bush, which is ideal. Now when it comes to gooseberries, it's slightly different, because normally we want the gooseberry to be on what we call a leg, which is just a short stem. It makes it easier to get underneath to prune, because gooseberries have these sharp spines on them, so we try and have a short stem off the ground, then the branching out above it. So what I'm going to do to start with is just take off these last few leaves. These will just pull off really simply, so it doesn't matter now. I mean, they'll be falling off any time soon anyway. And what we do with this one is make the cutting just a little bit longer to allow for that leg. So what I'm going to do is again just cut it straight cut underneath a bud there, and then I'm going to measure it. Now I want it to be longer, so I'm going to do it a pair of secateurs and probably half as long again. So I'm going to go to this bud there and make my sloping cut like that. So we've got quite a long cut in there, but what I want to do, instead of it having all these shoots growing from underground level from these buds that will be buried below the soil, I want this to be growth free and then the growth at the top. So what we're going to do is take these off. So first thing is, with the secateurs, I'm just going to snip off the thorns because they are going to get in the way. So just snip those off like that. Doesn't matter about the top ones, but it's just the base of the stem where I'm going to be handling it. So just take those off and then you need a knife. So just get your knife out, any sort of garden knife, and what we're going to do is take these lower buds off. So we don't want them to grow, so we're going to take them off. So I'm just going to use my little knife like that and just put it under the bud and almost snap it off. Okay, so I'm going to work my way up the stem, but I must remember not to do them all. So I've got to leave on the top maybe 4 or 5 buds. Doesn't matter if you leave a few more on. So what I'm going to do, I think that is probably, take that one off there. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 buds there. So if you imagine now we've got this longer cutting, as opposed to the one there on the blackcurrant or the red cutting. The reason is we're going to get this leg. So what we do with them now is we insert them either into the ground or into a pot. So I'll show you this one in a pot because it just demonstrates why we've taken these buds off the bottom on the gooseberry there. I've missed one there. So I'm going to push it. I want roughly a third in the compost, third is going to be the leg, and a third will be the growth at the top. So I'm going to hold it there and then push that down about a third and then just firm it into the ground. So the roots will form over winter from the base of that cutting. We've then got this clear piece of stem that will be here, and then these 5 or 6 buds at the top will grow to create the lovely head on it so that we can get underneath to weed it and prune and do all of those things. So that's a really easy way to deal with them, is just to push them into a pot. If we were pushing in our black currants or red currants, then we can push them in. Now these pots aren't as deep as if you're pushing them in the ground, so I'm going to push it in about halfway like that. So that would be absolutely fine. But the other way is you can then push them into the ground. So what you need to do is just to prepare a piece of ground, just rake it over like that. And there are 2 ways that you can do this. And just to make sure Molly's checking I'm doing this right. One is just to literally, Molly, can you just come out the way? Because I know you want to be involved, but you're blocking the camera. All right, you sit there and watch. That's a good girl, because I know you've not done blackcurrant cuttings before. Sit. This one, we're just going to push into the ground like this. So if Jill can get through you with the camera, this has been nicely forked, so I'm just going to push that into the soil. This is nicely forked, light soil. I'm going to push it down, so roughly 2/3 is in the soil and I've left about a third out, and it's these buds here that will grow, maybe 1 or 2 from below ground level. Now I've got lovely crumbly soil. If your soil is quite heavy clay, then the way round that is just to simply get a spade and just take out a sort of a V trench like that, and then you can position your cutting there to the height that you want, pull the soil back and lightly firm it in. And that's it. That's all you do, whether they're in pots like that or whether you've pushed them in the ground. You leave them, the roots will form over winter, they're totally hardy, and then in the spring these buds at the top will start to grow, and in a year's time you'll get young plants like this one here. Now if you remember last year at this time we pushed a few blackcurrant cuttings into the ground and just left them. If I get the fork in there and just give those a good old shake. So just 2 cuttings went in, exactly the same preparation as I've just done with those, and just pull those out, and we can see that they've both got a really good root system on them. So there we've got 1-year-old blackcurrant bushes which are now perfect for planting out into the garden. You could put them in bigger pots if you want them to, and when you do plant them in the garden, then always plant them a little bit deeper than they were grown. So with this one here, I would plant it to probably there, like that, and then prune it hard down. Don't leave that top growth on, because we've only got 2 branches here. Next year I want 6 branches, so I'm going to cut these down quite hard. These buds at the base will grow and we'll get lovely new growth that will then fruit the following year. I'm not ready to plant these just yet, so what I'm going to do is, just to keep the roots nice and moist, is just heel them in, just put them in a bit of a shallow hole like that, and just pull a bit of soil over them. That just prevents them from drying out, and then I'll get those planted in the next week or so when I'm ready for them. But what I'll show you now is some other things that you can do with your currant bushes. Well, this is a blackcurrant that was rooted in a pot, very similar to how I've put these in pots. Once they'd rooted by springtime and it's starting to grow, I then go into a slightly bigger pot. So this is a 2-litre pot, and it's made some nice growth on there. As you can see, it's made a lovely root system as well. So you can grow them in pots that way. Now you could, in theory, keep this in a pot and just go bigger and bigger, but really blackcurrants are better in the ground if you can. So that's sort of what it would look like a year or so on in a pot. But other things you can do, I've got this red currant here. Again, this was rooted in a pot exactly the same as this one here. When it started to grow, I selected just one stem and I've tied that, as you can see, to this short cane, and then all the little side shoots that have been produced, what I do is just keep trimming them back like that one, just to keep these little spurs, and as more grow further up here I will do exactly the same. And the idea is I'm creating what we call a cordon, and this works really well on red currants, white currants and gooseberries. It doesn't work on black currants because they fruit slightly differently, but on these plants it works well, and it means you can either grow them in large pots or you can plant them against a wall and a fence and just space them about 2 feet apart, and you get a lovely covering on the wall or fence and it fruits. It's also much easier to protect them from the birds because you can just drape some fleece or netting over them. And all we do in the summer and winter, all these shoots are taken back to just about 1 inch or so, and it creates these lovely columns of fruiting wood for the following year. And then finally, if you want to do something slightly more ornamental, this is one that I actually rooted several years ago, so it doesn't happen overnight, but this one I've trained just as a bit of a fan shape. So I've got it in a pot here, but again it's equally good against a wall or a fence. So we started just like this with a single cutting, and what it happened was, as all the growths grew, it made several growths from the base. I cut them back for the first year to encourage even more shoots, and then when you've got lots of long shoots you can then space them out, just literally pull them out like this, put some canes in to the pot or into the ground just to give them support like this, and tie them to it. So on this one I've got 5, but you could have 6 or 7, it doesn't really matter, and you can take it as high as you want. So this one obviously is in a pot, so it restricts the growth a little bit, but if it were in the ground it would grow much bigger. And it's the same principle as if you were pruning any cordon. We want the main framework of branches here, which are these 5 here, and then we shorten all the side shoots. So it's just a case of then going round it and doing it now at this time of the year and shortening all these little side shoots. So we've got these fruiting spurs. That one can come out, and just take these back a little bit to a bud. Always good practice. 1 or 2 inches, it's not that accurate, it doesn't really matter. And what we can then see is that we get these little growths on it, and it's on these little growths that we get our fruit forming next year. So a really good way to grow fruit bushes in a trained form, and they're so easy to propagate. So if you've got some, take some cuttings, or if you've got a friend that's got some in their garden, see if you can take a few cuttings, and then you've got your own fruit bushes for next year. So happy propagating. Thank you for watching Pots and Trowels, and remember, we are going to be with you every week all through the winter, so we'll be doing lots of gardening hints and tips and showing you what you can be doing in your garden. And next week we're going to be sharpening knives and secateurs to get them really sharp for all the winter pruning. So we'll see you then. Bye.